Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this carved money cake. Now I started off with some vanilla sponges. I baked one 7-inch and then one 6-inch and I placed these on top of each other. Now we're going to start by rounding these off, sort of like kind of like a half circle, I guess, maybe just not as round. So we're just going to take the edges off, try to not take off too much because you don't want to lose any of the size really of the cake. We just want it to be a lot rounder at the bottom, and we want to keep with the sort of like the smaller bit at the bottom and the bigger bit at the top. The reason I baked a 6 and a 7-inch is so that I've not got as much wasted cake, because obviously the top is already smaller. So you're just going to keep trimming away until you're happy. And then I've got a 12-inch board and we're just going to pop that on there. Now the rounded part goes on the bottom, and I'm just going to fill with some buttercream, and then the bigger part goes on top of that. We're just going to take off the excess at the top there. And then with this one I only put jam between this layer and none of the others because I wanted it to have a lot more stability. So just a bit of jam, and then we're going to fill with buttercream again, and then we're going to do the same again for the top of the cake. So I've done another 7-inch and another a 7-inch and another 6-inch, and I've done the same thing as before, rounded it all off. We're going to put some buttercream in between those, and then we're going to stack that on top of what we already have here. Try not to put too much buttercream on there because we don't want any bulges coming out of the sides. Haven't added any milk to my buttercream either, so that just makes it a little bit more sturdy. I've got a plastic dowel that I'm going to pop through the middle. That's just going to give us a little bit more stability when we're trying to ganache, and obviously it's going to hold the whole thing together. So I'm covering this with white chocolate ganache. I have a tutorial for this over on my channel. You can check out the ratios that I use. Obviously, had the cake have been any kind of chocolate flavoured, I would have used milk chocolate ganache. But for this one, I'm going to keep with the white chocolate. So my ganache at this point is quite runny because I don't want it to pull off the crumbs. And I've just got a flexi smoother and I'm just going around the cake and just taking off the excess. It doesn't have to be too neat at this point. This is literally just to hold the cake together while we put on another layer. So with the second layer of ganache, obviously my ganache is a little bit thicker by now because it's had a little bit more time to cool down. And we're just going to pop that on and just make sure that the ganache is covering everywhere. So we want it to be making sure that you're covering it from the bottom. It's a bit hard to get to because obviously it is sort of like underneath the rest of the cake, but you need to make sure you've got everywhere because you really want the ganache to hold everything together. So you can see I'm just popping this on now. So this cake's been in the fridge a little bit, which will also help with the ganache firming up quite quickly. And so you can see I'm just slapping it on, making sure that I cover everywhere. Obviously when you do this bit it doesn't have to be too neat because we're going to go in with the flexi smoother afterwards, and that's just going to smooth everything out. And you could also use the hot knife method as well if you wanted to. So trying to keep the shape that we've already carved and just smoothing out everything. So once you've done that, you can let the cake dry for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to take some white fondant and we're just going to create some movement within the cake. So we want the bag to look like it's full, and it's, you know, being tied at the top. And so we need to create that movement with inside the cake. So I've just got some white fondant and we're going to roll out some sausages that are pointy at one side than the other. and we're just going to place these on the cake. Now be careful, once you've decided where the front of your cake is, kind of want to leave a little bit of space, because that's where I've put the money sign. So depending on where you're from, you could put the pound sign, you could put the US dollar sign, you could put any kind of money sign there that you wanted. You could also change it and have a name there maybe. So you need to make sure that at the front of the cake you leave that space available so that it's flat, so that something can sit on there. But the rest of the cake you want to go around and put these marks on. You don't need to smooth them out too much, but they do sort of like need to sit flush with the cake at the side, so that when you cover it with fondant, you're not just going to get a sort of like a really bulky ridge. It needs to be quite smooth. So I've rolled, once I've finished doing this, I've rolled out some white fondant and I have popped this on the cake. So smoothing it from the bottom to the top and then wrapping it around. Now if you end up with extra folds, that's not a problem. Pinch them to the top like I've done there, and we're just going to cut that off with some scissors. Extra folds are fine, it just gives you more movement in the cake and it just really adds to the look that we're going for. So smooth it with your fingers, just making sure that you tuck it in underneath the bottom and you accentuate where the pieces of fondant are underneath the cake. So you can see I'm just pulling it around and tucking it in and just using my fingers to go over everything, making an extra fold there by pinching, and then I'm just going to chop that with some scissors. And if you make a fold where obviously you can see that the fondant has fallen short, so if you make a little bit of a fold there, then when we next get some fondant to stick on there, we can kind of tuck it under and it just makes it look really natural. So you can see I'm just going to pop a little bit of extra fondant on there. Again, creating a fold at the top and trimming off the excess. And I'm just going to tuck that join behind the bit that I created earlier on. Make sure that you tuck it in at the bottom. You don't want to leave a gap at the bottom because obviously it means that your cake's exposed there, and also it is visible when you take pictures. So just make sure that you're tucking it in there, and then just using your fingers to go over the marks that we've made within the bag. So you can see there, I'm just going to trim off what's too much, and then we're just going to roll it up and fold it in. And then trimming off any excess, and make sure that you smooth out the cake as much as you can. You really need to make sure that the ganache is quite smooth under here, because obviously it's difficult to get in there with any kind of smoother to smooth out the areas. So the smoother the ganache is, the better the fondant is going to sit on top of there. So just going in and neatening up everything that you've got, and once you've done this, we're going to roll out some more fondant and we're going to make the top of the bag. So you can see I've left it quite thick. We're going to level off the bottom and the top so it's the same all the way along. You need to leave it quite thick so that it gives you a little bit of stability and it kind of holds itself up when it's there. So I'm going to chop it down a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of ruffle this up. So we're going to hold one side and we're just going to pinch it together, kind of like a loose concertina type of thing is what we're going for. Tight at the bottom and then a bit looser at the top, because this is where the money's going to come out of. So you can see I'm holding it at the bottom, but I'm allowing the top to do what it wants to do. And we're just going to fold this into a circle. And this is what is going to sit on top of the cake. So I'm just going to attach this with a little bit of water. So I'm going to put the water on, and then I'm going to put the concertina ruffled top on there. And then I'm just going to push it into the place that I want, creating lots of lovely ripples, because these are going to be what support the money coming out of the cake. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a cocktail stick underneath that. That's just going to hold it up while it's drying. This just stops it from flopping about everywhere. I think when I made this cake, the humidity was just crazy, and so it did take a while to dry. So it took about overnight for it to dry where I could take the cocktail sticks out. But just go ahead and work your way around the cake and pop the cocktail sticks in where you feel it's needed. You don't have to worry too much about the middle of the cake that you can see there, because this is all going to be covered with money. So that's what you should have so far. So next I've taken some yellow fondant, and we're just going to roll some really long sausages. You're going to do 2 of these, roughly the same thickness. And this is just going to create the rope effect that goes around the cake to kind of look like it's tied. And so you're going to roll those together, and then you're just going to twist. And you're going to do that for both sides, pinching together at the end just to kind of hold it together. Always start from the middle, otherwise you end up with something that's quite loose by the time you get to the other side. And then with the cake, again, we're just going to use a little bit of water just around the edges, and then we're just going to wrap the rope around. So you can see that I've just made sure that the rope finishes or looks like it's been tied at the front of the cake, tucking it underneath where the cake is, the top of the bag is open, and that's just going to give a little bit of support to that too. Next, with the same yellow fondant, I'm going to cut out a pound sign. So I've just free-handed this. You could make an edible print if you wanted to. It's completely up to you. The reason that I've used the yellow is because when you paint the gold on, it goes less streaky if it's yellow. Sometimes if you leave it and it's white, it can take forever to paint, and you can always see little streaks that are there. So it probably would have been a little less time consuming had I have had an edible print for this. And hindsight, because I'd already printed the money off, I probably could have fitted one of these on the sheet as well. Now, one thing that I will tell you is it's quite hard to get an edible image of a £50 note. I struggled really, really badly because everyone that I came to kept telling me that it couldn't be printed, and I'm assuming that that's for copyright reasons. If I can find the picture that I used, I will put the link in the description box below. So once you're happy with your pound sign or your dollar sign or whatever it is that you choose to use, we're just going to stick that on to the front of the cake with a little bit of water. So I'm just going to pop it here. I've already wet that, and so I'm just going to push that into place like so. So here I have got a mixture of about 4 different golds, and I've mixed this with some lemon juice. That is because this cake was halal, so obviously if the cake is halal you can't use the dipping solution or the vodka, and so I just use lemon juice to mix this together. Once you've covered the rope and the pound sign in the gold, we're then going to cover the board. Now, I decided to go with kind of like a loose kind of fabric material look for the board covering, and I went with black because it was a cake for a boy, and I didn't want any kind of colours to clash with the £50 notes. And so we're just going to wrap this around the cake. Now, naturally, when you wrap it, you're going to create a fold, and that's the fold that you want to keep. If you want to put a name on the front of the board or an age or anything like that, you need to make sure that the front is smooth so that you've got room to place that name, because otherwise your letters won't stick on flush. And so the same process that we've just done for the front there, we're going to do for the back. So again, just popping it on and then wrapping it around. So you can see as I wrap, it's creating a natural fold anyway. And we're just going to pull the fabric or the fondant down a little bit just to cover the board. So you can see I've got cocktail sticks holding the rope in place just to make sure that doesn't fall down. And then just chopping off the bit that's not needed. Now here's the £50 notes that I got. So some of them I've used just as the print, and some of them I've put onto the fondant. So any kind of that needed to be propped up or hold their shape a little bit better, I put on the fondant. And the ones that didn't need to, I just stuck straight onto the cake. So we're just going to stick these on with a little bit of water. Just peeling off the back, popping them on. And then I'm just going to cut around these notes, trying to get as close as you can to the actual notes so that none of the fondant is showing. So you can see I've just taken off the excess and then making sure that the sides are stuck down properly. You're going to do that for all of the notes that you decide to do this with. And then now we're just going to apply them to the front of the cake. So we want to create a little bit of movement. So you can see I'm just moving the areas, sticking it down into the middle and having it so it looks like it's draping over. Now if you wanted to have it stood straight up, you could make the fondant at the back thicker and put a kebab skewer through that and then stick that into the cake, which would give the illusion that the money was actually standing up. But I wanted to make this one look like the money was just overflowing from the cake. So just sticking it with a little bit of water. For the ones that aren't stuck on any fondant, you can just stick those straight on. If you wet the fondant first that's on the bag, and like I'm doing here, and then just push it into place. You can create a bit of movement with these ones as well. It's just that they tend to, if there's any humidity in the air without the fondant behind it, they can sort of like flop really, really easy and go a bit sticky. So it's kind of looking like that. And you're just going to keep building the money up on the top of the cake, just sticking it down with a little bit of water, propping bits up with cocktail sticks if needed while it dries. So once you've finished adding the money, you should have something that looks like this. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have, please give a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below. And if you want to see more of my videos, please click the links on the screen now. Thanks for watching.